Who owns New Zealand? The answer to this question very much depends on one's own perspective and involvement in this beautiful land of the long white cloud, Aotearoa, as known by the Maori people. My name is Raymond Hope, a professional musician of Maori and British heritage. My great-great-great-grandfather, a significant Maori chief, was a signatory of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. So, this is my perspective to answering the question, who owns New Zealand? Some years ago, I had the privilege of meeting a man called Bernard de Beera, who amongst other things was a constitutional law historian, educated at Cambridge University, England. On learning that I had Maori heritage, he recounted how he had studied the Treaty of Waitangi as an undergraduate and became aware of significant anomalies in that document. Bernard explained to me that the New Zealand Maori people, represented by 35 Maori chiefs, had already declared their sovereign independence on 28th October 1835, duly ratified in the House of Commons in Westminster, Great Britain in 1836, during the reign of William IV. The Treaty of Waitangi was a document embodying and reiterating the pre-existing sole sovereignty of the Maori people, Tino Rangatiratanga in the Maori version, but in the English version, sole sovereignty is claimed by the British. Essentially, the treaty was a contract between Queen Victoria in her person and the Maori people, and as such determined on her demise in 1901. The Waitangi Treaty was not a document of concord between the Maori people and the New Zealand Crown. At no time did the Maori people cede sovereignty, which is supported by the fact that in 1863, a number of Maori chiefs visited Queen Victoria at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight without visiting the foreign government at Westminster. The Maori people bestowed on Queen Victoria the role of kawanatanga, meaning governance, not sovereignty, as is falsely represented by the so-called New Zealand Crown. My next conversation with Bernard about the treaty was when I found myself embroiled in a standoff between myself and the New Zealand government. Because I live in Australia, I decided to bring all my belongings here, including the kaitaka worn by my great-great-great-grandfather and Nokapotai, allegedly worn at his signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, which had been handed down to me by my mother, who was a descendant of this paramount chief. While being respectful of the fact that there should be control of Maori treasures being sold in other countries, at the same time I question the legality of a technically foreign government exercising control over what does not belong to them. The governing body in question is the Ministry for Culture and Heritage, utilising their Protected Objects Act of 1975, which maybe I breached, whereby the Ministry of Culture and Heritage encouraged me to return this kaitaka to Aotearoa, even though it was freely passed on to me by my mother. Quoting from the Protected Objects Act of 1975 is the following, under Section 7, Paragraph 1. If the object is deemed to be a protected New Zealand object, you will be required to submit photographs of the object prior to a decision allowing the export of this object being made by the Chief Executive. The photographs submitted are then the property of the Ministry. Is the New Zealand Crown unwittingly showing a deeper assumption that it already owns the Maori culture, including, but not limited to, Maori taonga? Bernard shared with me his perception that as a result of sovereignty having never been ceded by the Maori people, that all laws, including but not limited to, for example, all statutes, land ownership by foreign investors, land ownership by the Crown, licenses to foreign mining companies, etc., 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 which were not formally ratified by the Maori people, were and are in fact illegal. Furthermore, in my learned friend's opinion, all decisions made by the so-called New Zealand Crown, where these decisions were not formally ratified by the Maori people, are all illegal, without exception. So how does this relate to my relatively small issue regarding my ancestors' kaitaka? It appears that the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, because it is an arm of the New Zealand Crown, is therefore an illegal entity, utilising an illegal law, which has not been formally ratified by the only occupying sovereign power, that of the Maori people. The point of this video is very simple. It is intended to provoke debate, whereby the question of Maori sovereignty can be constructively addressed and resolved to the satisfaction of all those concerned, both Maori and Pākehā. The true ownership of Aotearoa by the Maori people can be, and indeed must be, formally recognised not only within Aotearoa, but within the international community as a whole. So, let me summarise into a few salient points the basic material that I have shared in this presentation. In the Maori version, which is the only relevant one by which the treaty should be viewed, the Maori people bestowed on Queen Victoria governance, kawanatanga, and not sovereignty, Tino Rangatiratanga. The Treaty of Waitangi was a contract freely made between the Maori people and Queen Victoria in her person, not as a representative of the British Crown. And as a consequence, this contract ceased to exist from the time of her demise on 22nd January 1901. On the demise of Queen Victoria on 22nd January 1901, sole sovereignty remained with the Maori people as per the Declaration of Independence of New Zealand 1835, ratified in the House of Commons, Westminster, in 1836, before the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in 1840. On the demise of Queen Victoria on 22nd January 1901, the Maori people, being the pre-existing sole sovereign owners, were free to choose the manner of governance of Aotearoa from that day on. To this day, the Maori people, being the sole legitimate sovereign owners of Aotearoa, have the inalienable right to withdraw the rights of any governing body, including the so-called New Zealand Crown. This can only be, and indeed must be, tested in an impartial international court, utilising the learned opinions and advice of constitutionalists, lawyers, and academics from around the world in a free, open, and completely transparent forum. I would like to dedicate this presentation to the memory of my great-great-great-grandfather, Enoka Te Potai Aute, who, in representing the Maori people of Ngāti Porou, signed the East Coast Sheet of the Treaty of Waitangi on 9th June 1840 in good faith. Also, my mother, Hona Pororangi Potai, who passed on to me her great-great-grandfather's kaitaka because of my passionate interest in our Maori culture, And lastly, the people of Ngāti Porou on the east coast of the North Island of Aotearoa. Finally, I would also like to give a very special thanks to Bernard de Brera, whose knowledge, sense of justice and wisdom inspired me to make this video. Thank you.
Could be